And so Paul is writing to them, and he's writing to the church of Corinth, and he's talking about this church in Macedonia that they gave, and he says entirely on their own, they urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of taking part in this. And you can understand Paul thinking about this. He's sitting there thinking about it going, wait a second, you're like in as bad shape as the church in Jerusalem is. Well, you know, why do you even want to give? Don't you need the money for yourselves? You know? I mean, it's like being that pastor looking at this Haitian guy that's holding the 2 cans of Coke, and you're going, you know, why do you even want it? I mean, that's your food. Why do you want to give that to me? It doesn't make sense. But it says that they urgently pleaded entirely on their own to have the privilege of sharing in this service to us with the saints. And then he goes on to say they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us in keeping with God's will. They did not neglect the ministry that was happening where they were. They knew that the ministry needed to keep going on at the church of Macedonia. That there were ministry needs that needed to be taken care of. There were sick that needed to be tended to. There were poor that needed to be tended to. There were people that needed to be loved and taught, and people that needed to be helped out where they were. So they gave themselves, as was the Lord's will, to God, and they didn't neglect from that. But they also gave themselves to the apostles, to Peter, to Paul, as they were collecting this offering to help the church in Jerusalem and to provide for their needs. They gave for both. It was a whole life action. It's that same picture of the first fruit and the last ends, at the very back side of it. Christianity Today posted an article concerning the nature of giving in Christianity, and this is what it said. That the poorest Christians give more dollars than all but the wealthiest Christians. Not percentages, but dollars. Do you remember the story of the widow's mite? As Jesus was talking to his disciples, and there were all of these great, rowdy, well-off people that were there at the synagogue or there at the temple, and they brought their money bags, and they would clink, clink, throw the money in, and it would make this big sound, and everybody would go, wow, that's a big spender, man. That person really loved God. How much money they're giving. And so they're getting all of this praise for what they're putting in. And then comes this woman who had a small coin, basically our equivalent of a penny. She set it on the ledge and slipped in quietly. And Jesus looked at his disciples and he pointed at her and he said, she gave more than all of those guys. Because she gave out of her poverty. She gave out of her heart. Not just merely out of her abundance. It is a whole life understanding when we come to generosity. You see, the concept of generosity as it wells up in our lives and the grace giving of God is that we do not give to God so that God will then in turn give back to us. It's not like God is a 401k that if we put enough into Him, He'll turn around and give us a good reward on us. God's not some kind of mutual fund that, if I just give Him stuff, then He'll add a couple of zeros to it and give it back to me. In fact, Scripture says that that is not the case. We are loving money and having that as our God over loving God. The truth is that we will get something back, though. We reap a harvest of righteousness. When we sow generously into God, into His work, the righteousness that we get to see reaped back is we get to see lives come to faith in Jesus Christ. We get to hear about orphans that we've been able to support and love, who now have food to eat, clothes to wear, and now get to have a life that's not marked by slavery and sex trafficking and other things like that. We get to hear about addicts who have been chemically addicted to substances, and because we've so generously into ministries that help those people and love those people and nurture those people, we get to hear about them having their lives put back together and their families restored. We get to pour into those people, and when we give generously to that place, we also reap generously the harvest of righteousness. Now, I do believe that those who give, God honors by giving them a greater ability to give. I do believe that. I do believe that the teaching of the the tenets is that those who much is given, much is required. And so as we give and as we are obedient to that, as we serve, God then pours back into us a greater ability to serve Him. But it's not some kind of get-rich-quick scheme that we have with God in serving in money. Generosity is a whole life action and issue in our lives. And ultimately, what's the last thing? What is the heart of generosity? What is the sum total of generosity? And Paul answers it in verse 13 and 15. It says that the heart of generosity is Christian equality. He says, our desire is not that others might be relieved while you are hard-pressed. Listen, we don't want you to give away to such the point just so that you'll be hard-pressed and they'll not have any suffering. He says, but we want you to give. At the present time, your plenty will supply their need, so that in turn, their plenty will supply what you need. Then there will be equality. As it is written, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little did not have too little. Christian equality looks like this, that when we are in great times of prosperity and things are good for us, we have the ability to help our brothers and sisters in Christ and people all around the world, bring them to a place where they are actually human again. They have food, they have water, they have shelter, they have love, they have compassion. And we bring them to a place of equality. Because there is coming a day when we will be at the same place that they are. Christians in America have been sending missionaries to Korea for several hundred years now. We've been loving and pouring into Korean people and nurturing them in the gospel of Christ. Did you know that last year the Korean Baptist Mission, this is what I understand, had 10,000 foreign missionaries sent out from where they were around the world? That's Korean Christians sending missionaries to the United States to start churches and to love people with the gospel message of Jesus Christ. We think we're the ones that are so on the ball for our servitude. And they're the ones sending people, and we wouldn't think of Koreans as being well off, but they are rich in righteousness. Currently, in all world circumstances, there's lots of good humanitarian things that are happening. The Red Cross is serving all over the place. Anyways, lots of good, my mind's going blank on a couple of their names. But, anytime you see disaster, you hear of all of these groups that are out there serving, out there loving, out there feeding food, fixing homes, and digging people out of rubble, and just being there and loving those people. Did you know that currently in those American-based service groups, that 80 to 90% of their volunteers are members of evangelical churches? And I think what they do is great. Here is my problem. They serve, and Red Cross gets the glory. Jesus does not get the glory. And He's the one that deserves it. We don't deserve it. When we go do service things, we're not, hey, look at church without walls, look how great we are. If that's the case, we've received all of our glory. We serve because Christ served us. And we love people. The ultimate understanding of generosity, the ultimate understanding of reaping a harvest in this world is that one day we will breathe our last and we will stand before God in heaven and we will only have one kind of possession with us. That is those that we brought to faith in Jesus Christ. They're the only possession, that you can quote unquote say possession, only thing that we will have to wrap our arms around in heaven. And we said, this is here because of the grace of Jesus, because I have my obedience. The heart of Christian generosity is Christian equality, because it allows Jesus to get glory, and it allows people to see not just, oh, look, here's some nice people giving me food,